Writing stories is hard. Are you working on a film? Or a narrative of any kind? Yeah! Yeah! I'm working on a movie. I want to talk about your trash bin of ideas. Stuff that you've tossed out. Maybe you felt like it was uninspired, or maybe the idea's been done over and over again. What I want to do is introduce a list of if this, but this, then this equations that might kick that project in his bum again, get it running on the legs. Talking about big edits to your project's core that might reinvigorate your energy towards it. Fuck it, man.
Number 5.
Completely change the point of view. It's not too far-fetched of an idea, and it actually functions really well if you're already working with a proverbial hero with 1,000 faces. Let's look at a good example of this. John Carpenter's Big Trouble in Little China. My chair makes like a farty noise every time I sit down. It's a deceptively clever film. I can wait all day. Now hear me out. We've got your character, Kurt Hustle, and he's on a quest to save his girlfriend, defeat the Asian stereotype, and save the day. Surely, Kurt believes this as his character in its entirety, but he's an unreliable narrator. If you're watching the same schlock that I am, you'll notice that it's his friend Wang Chi who's actually going on a quest to save his girlfriend, and has all the karate moves, has the climactic battle with the tough guys, and there's another goddamn plane coming through Virginia Beach again. God damn it. Jack, however, is the slapstick humor that seems to think that he's the most important. This whole movie is being told from a sidekick's perspective. Now, maybe that didn't really translate in theaters, but it was pitched just that way. And what if this story was told by the villain? Is he really the antagonist, or can you make us sympathize with his actions? Or even more far-fetched, consider a character completely removed from the conflict. Why not make this more interesting by telling it through the eyes of someone who has to simply coincide with these big clashing destinies? Somebody who's got to live with the decisions of others who may not even know he exists. Someone who has to prove to you, to me, and to his universe that he is just as instrumental and important and decisive in the main story.
Number 4.
Write a series of vignettes in your universe. You're here because you're tired of what you've created. Or maybe you feel like your story is flimsy. How do you begin beefing up that big world of yours? I don't. Usually what I tell people after they've laid a bit of groundwork is literally just write. Open up a few moments in time that adhere to the rules of your world. Maybe they have beginnings, maybe they have endings, and usually they have neither. Give yourself a level of abandon that you don't usually give yourself with your main characters. Write from the past, write from the present, write from the future. Keep it if you like it, and toss it out if it's not cutting the pepperoni. Maybe these little windows become part of your lore, and maybe they even make up the story itself. Oh, it's another one! I can't do it anymore.
Number 3.
Try taking one key feature of your movie and making it a complete mystery. Now, some people take this and they choose one minor feature, and that becomes like a reoccurring mystery through the movie. What I mean is one very big, essential part of your film. Take it, and then you don't say a damn thing about it. I've got one piece in mind for this film, and that is Catherine Bigelow's 1987 Near Dark. Anyone who's seen this movie knows it's a vampire movie with one odd anecdote. They don't say the word vampire in the entire movie. Now, maybe that's not very impressive, but let's look at what happens when you do that. What is the first thing that comes in your head when you hear the phrase vampire movie? There, see? You had a preconception. No matter what it was, good or bad, or maybe not. Removing attention to what otherwise might be considered a selling point to the film adds some mystery and some elimination of rules that we have in our heads of how this story should play out. Now that is just the epidermal layer of this. The real power that this has is what you now do with your mysterious asset. Will you keep people guessing as to whether or not your vampire adheres to the rules? Will you reinvent the disease? Will you mention it once and maybe never return to it again? As a writer, you have complete control, and you can't be afraid to kick out the crutches of your forefathers.
Number 2.
Now this is an odd one, and one I've only really used when I felt like the story really didn't need to be told. Let's say you have your characters, your plot points, your beginnings, endings, everything is fleshed out, and you don't need to tell this story. You don't want to tell this story. Considering everything is pretty much mapped out, let's take that and see what happens when you add 20 years, or 10 years, or 50 years, it doesn't really matter. What I mean is taking things into the future, or into the past, making your own prequel or sequel to a movie that doesn't exist. You've effectively developed a very full backstory, full of characters with emotions and histories and opinions about your world and where it's going and what has happened to it. As long as we're keeping up with the references, one Orson Scott Card once wrote a story called Speaker for the Dead. Now, in a similar motion discussed, he actually felt that there was too much story being told. He wanted to take a step back to, maybe for his own benefit, just write a story based around his main character that developed him a little bit more. Now that story became the best-selling Ender's Game. Might be kind of a cheap trick, but it's, who cares?
Number 1.
Game of Thrones. A true treasure of our times. It's a beautifully written series, where this sort of thing happens a lot. But in a show this big, with this many characters, it's more like a juggling act, keeping you on your seat to see which ball we could drop next. I think, as a writer, this kind of thing gets harder to do on a much smaller scope, with far less people. Maybe you only got one? And failure doesn't necessarily limit itself to death. At the center of your conflict, what is your character trying to prove, and what does it mean when they fail? As with any real-ass person, they're still around afterwards. They deal with loss, and maybe learn things, and it sucks. Maybe they could even be shown that they're the bad guy in the story. Stranger yet, what if they're shown that they didn't need to succeed in the first place? Let's take a look at the first Rocky movie, and maybe try and figure out why it's the only one that doesn't feel like I just put a 80s ham sandwich in my VCR. It's because after we see him try his hardest and work his ass off, he still fails. I remember when I was little watching this, I had to rewind it because I didn't understand what happened. I think they added in like one clip just to tell you that he lost. This is intentional, and I'll tell you why. Because at this point in the film, he doesn't need to win. At the beginning of the story, he's having a hard time. He's barely making it by, he's lonely, he's self-depreciative, and nobody really cares about him. By the end, he's just happy that he's made it this far. He's happy that he's made the connections with other people around him that mattered much more than just beating up a dude. Now this is a happy failure, and I could have gone with maybe like a more traditional tragedy formula, but I felt like I had more to say about an ending that gives you mixed feelings. Tragedy is a very valid path to explore and see what happens, how you feel about it. But as with anything I've mentioned, make sure that it has a purpose, that it complements the story and your characters. For me though, I like to know that you can still fail and lead a meaningful life. You know, like maybe you could major in a laughable degree and then be improperly trained for the real world industry and then have your major program dissipated 2 years after you graduate and still have all the debt. Looking at you, my Ed. Self-editing can be hard, but harder still is continuing with a story that has no wind in its sails. I love ya. Get out of my home. Thanks for watching my video film. If you want, there's like a Facebook page in the description. Who cares?